Welcome, weary South Park residents, to a gentle journey through the mountain town's most tender soul. Tonight, we explore the life and times of Leopold Butters Stotch, a boy whose innocence shines like a beacon through Colorado's snowy streets. From his earliest appearances as a background character to becoming one of South Park's most beloved figures, Butters represents the light that persists despite darkness. So settle into your covers, close your eyes like you're heading to Bennigan's for a special treat, and let us drift together through the surprisingly complex world of South Park's sweetest resident. Rest easy, and let's begin. In the quiet mythology of South Park, Colorado, there exists a character whose genesis reveals as much about the nature of storytelling itself as it does about the evolution of childhood innocence. Leopold Butters Stotch began his existence not as a fully realized individual, but as a whisper of possibility, a background figure whose potential lay dormant in the margins of animated frames, waiting for the precise moment when creators would recognize the extraordinary within the ordinary. His journey from silent observer to beloved character represents one of television's most organic character developments, a gradual awakening that mirrors the way real personalities emerge from the complexities of human experience. The earliest glimpses of what would become Butters appeared in South Park's pilot episode, though few viewers at the time could have predicted the significance of this quiet, blonde child sitting among his classmates. In these initial appearances, he was merely part of the visual landscape, one face among many in the carefully constructed world of South Park Elementary. His design was already distinct, featuring the characteristic bowl cut and gentle facial features that would become iconic, but there was no indication that this particular background character would eventually become one of the show's most essential figures. The artistic decision to include Butters in these early episodes reflects the remarkable foresight of creators Matt Stone and Trey Parker, who understood intuitively that great storytelling requires a rich ecosystem of characters, each contributing to the overall texture and authenticity of the fictional world. Even when Butters had no lines and served no specific narrative function, his presence added weight and reality to the classroom scenes, creating the impression of a genuine community rather than just a stage for the main characters to perform upon. During these silent years, Butters existed in a state of pure potential, his character design suggesting certain qualities without yet having the opportunity to express them. His appearance conveyed innocence and approachability, with soft features and clothing choices that marked him as different from the more assertive personalities of Stan, Kyle, Kenny, and Eric. The careful attention to his visual presentation during these early episodes suggests that the creators were already developing an intuitive sense of who this character might become, even if they hadn't yet articulated his specific traits or role in the larger narrative structure. The transition from background presence to speaking character represents one of the most significant evolutionary moments in South Park's development. When Butters finally received his first lines of dialogue in Season 2, the voice that emerged was tentative and generic, lacking the distinctive vocal patterns that would later make him instantly recognizable. These early vocal experiments reveal the organic process through which fictional characters develop their unique identities, moving from conceptual possibilities to fully realized individuals with specific ways of speaking, thinking, and interacting with their environment. The true breakthrough in Butters' character development came through an unexpected source of inspiration that demonstrates how real-life relationships can profoundly influence creative works. Eric Stowe, the show's longtime animation director, possessed personality traits and vocal patterns that resonated with Matt Stone and Trey Parker's vision of what their background character could become. Stoff's natural enthusiasm, innocent perspective, and distinctive way of expressing himself provided the template for what would eventually become Butters' fully realized personality. The process of translating Stoff's real-world characteristics into animated form required careful consideration of how personality traits manifest in different contexts. The creators needed to capture not just the surface-level qualities that made Stoff distinctive, but the underlying psychological patterns that drove his behavior and shaped his interactions with others. This meant understanding how genuine innocence operates in a world that often rewards cynicism, how enthusiasm persists in the face of repeated disappointment, and how certain individuals maintain their essential sweetness, despite experiencing circumstances that might harden others. The name Leopold Butters Stotch itself reflects this careful character construction, combining formal dignity with childlike warmth in a way that captures the essential contradiction of his personality. Leopold suggests aristocratic bearing and serious intentions, while Butters conveys simplicity, comfort, and unpretentious charm. The surname Stotch adds a slightly Germanic flavor that grounds the character in the specific cultural context of Colorado's mountain communities, while also suggesting the kind of middle-class respectability that would become central to his family's identity and dysfunction. When Butters finally spoke his first substantial lines in Season 3's Meteor Shower trilogy, the voice that emerged was already remarkably close to what fans would come to know and love. The tentative quality of his early dialogue experiments had been replaced by a distinctive vocal pattern that conveyed both eagerness and uncertainty, enthusiasm tempered by an awareness of his precarious social position. His speech patterns revealed a child who desperately wanted to please others, while remaining fundamentally uncertain about the social rules that governed his interactions. The Meteor Shower trilogy episodes served as Butters' true introduction to the South Park universe, establishing many of the personality traits that would define him throughout the series. His immediate willingness to befriend Stan despite their class differences, his excitement about activities that other children might find boring, and his innocent misunderstanding of adult situations all emerged during these early appearances. These episodes also established his relationship with Dougie, another quiet child who would become one of his few genuine friends, suggesting that even in his earliest appearances, Butters was drawn to others who shared his outsider status. The creative decision to have Butters suggest playing Charlie's Angels with lady clothes during one of his first major scenes reveals the sophisticated character work already taking place in these early episodes. This moment establishes several key aspects of his personality simultaneously: his comfort with role-playing and imagination, his lack of concern for traditional gender boundaries, and his ability to find creative solutions to social situations. The fact that this suggestion comes naturally to him, without self-consciousness or awareness of potential social consequences, perfectly captures the innocence that would become his defining characteristic. Throughout these foundational episodes, Butters displayed a remarkable ability to maintain his optimistic outlook, despite being thrust into situations that would typically overwhelm a child of his age and temperament. When faced with the potential destruction of the party guests by militarized police, he doesn't retreat into paralysis or despair, but instead actively participates in efforts to warn the adults and protect them from harm. This early demonstration of courage under pressure established a pattern that would persist throughout the series, showing that his gentleness should never be mistaken for weakness or cowardice. The development of Butters' relationship with authority figures during these early episodes reveals another crucial aspect of his character psychology. Unlike many children who instinctively rebel against adult rules and expectations, Butters approached authority with a combination of respect and confusion that reflected his genuine desire to do the right thing, coupled with his frequent uncertainty about what that might entail. His interactions with Mr. Mackey and other adults during the Meteor Shower trilogy showed a child who wanted desperately to please authority figures while struggling to understand their sometimes contradictory messages and expectations. The artistic evolution of Butters' character design during these early seasons reflects the growing understanding of who he was becoming as a personality. His facial expressions became more nuanced and expressive, capable of conveying complex emotions like confused disappointment, hesitant excitement, and gentle determination. His body language developed its own distinctive patterns, with posture and gestures that reinforced his personality traits and helped distinguish him from other characters even in crowd scenes. The relationship between Butters and his classmates began to take shape during these foundational episodes, establishing dynamics that would persist and deepen throughout the series. His eagerness to be included and accepted, combined with his natural tendency to defer to stronger personalities, created a social position that was both endearing and tragic. Other children recognized his good nature and reliability, but they also learned that his desire for acceptance made him particularly susceptible to manipulation and exploitation. The creative team's growing confidence in Butters as a character became evident in the increasing complexity of the situations they placed him in and the sophistication of his responses to those challenges. Rather than simply reacting to events around him, he began to demonstrate agency and initiative, making choices that revealed his moral compass and personal values. His decision to risk danger by ziplining out of the house to deliver the crucial videotape showed a level of personal courage that elevated him beyond simple comic relief into the realm of genuine heroism. The psychological realism of Butters' character development during these early episodes reflects the creator's growing understanding of how real children actually think, speak, and behave in complex social situations. Rather than presenting him as a simple archetype or one-dimensional comic figure, they began to explore the genuine complexity of a child who possesses unusual emotional maturity in some areas while remaining completely naive in others. This combination of wisdom and innocence would become the foundation for all of his future character development. The establishment of Butters' distinctive worldview during these formative episodes created the philosophical framework that would guide his actions throughout the series. His fundamental belief in the goodness of other people, combined with his natural tendency to find positive aspects in even difficult situations, provided a consistent lens through which he would interpret future experiences. This optimistic perspective would prove both his greatest strength and his most exploitable weakness, creating the tragic comedy that would define many of his storylines. The technical aspects of bringing Butters to life as a fully realized character required careful attention to details like timing, vocal inflection, and animated movement that would make him feel authentic and distinct from other characters. The development of his characteristic speech patterns, including his tendency to use formal language in casual situations and his habit of expressing uncertainty through vocal upturn, created a linguistic signature that would make him instantly recognizable to audiences. As these foundational episodes concluded, Butters had evolved from a silent background presence into a character with his own distinctive voice, personality, and role within the South Park universe. The careful construction of his identity during this period created a solid foundation for the complex character development that would follow, establishing the essential traits that would persist while leaving room for growth, change, and the exploration of new facets of his personality. The transformation from unknown quantity to beloved character represents one of the most successful examples of organic character development in animated television, demonstrating how great fictional personalities can emerge naturally from the intersection of creative vision, real-world inspiration, and careful attention to psychological authenticity. The genesis of Butter's innocence during these early episodes established patterns and themes that would resonate throughout the entire series, creating a character whose simple presence could evoke both laughter and genuine emotional investment from audiences. In the quiet development of this background figure into a fully realized individual, we see reflected the larger miracle of how fictional characters can transcend their origins to become meaningful parts of our cultural consciousness, teaching us about empathy, resilience, and the enduring power of maintaining hope in a complex world. In the complex tapestry of dysfunctional family relationships that populate the animated landscape of South Park, few dynamics reveal as much about the intersection of love and damage as the household of Steven and Linda Stotch. Their relationship with their son Leopold represents a masterclass in how well-intentioned parents can create profound psychological harm through a combination of misguided protective instincts, unresolved personal traumas, and a fundamental misunderstanding of what children actually need to develop into healthy adults. The Stotch family dynamic serves as both comedy and tragedy, illustrating how the most damaging parental behaviors often stem not from malice but from fear, insecurity, and the desperate desire to be good parents despite lacking the emotional tools necessary for the task. Steven Stotch embodies the archetype of the anxious modern father, a man whose own unresolved psychological issues manifest as an obsessive need to control his son's environment and experiences. His approach to parenting reflects the mindset of someone who views childhood as a series of potential disasters to be prevented, rather than opportunities for growth and learning. This defensive approach to child rearing creates an atmosphere of constant vigilance and anxiety that transforms the family home from a place of safety and nurturing into a zone of perpetual scrutiny and punishment. The psychology behind Steven's parenting style reveals a man who has internalized messages about masculine responsibility and paternal authority without developing the emotional intelligence necessary to apply these concepts constructively. His frequent resort to grounding as a disciplinary tool suggests a parent who feels overwhelmed by the complexities of child development and falls back on the most basic form of control available to him. The arbitrary nature of many of Butter's punishments reflects Steven's inability to distinguish between genuine misbehavior and normal childhood exploration, leading to a disciplinary system that teaches confusion rather than moral clarity. Linda Stotch represents a different but equally problematic parental archetype, the enabler whose desire to maintain family harmony leads her to support decisions that she privately recognizes as harmful or unreasonable. Her tendency to defer to her husband's judgment, even when that judgment is clearly flawed, demonstrates the way that codependent relationship patterns can amplify dysfunction, rather than providing the checks and balances that healthy family systems require. Her occasional moments of clarity and concern for Butter's well-being are consistently overwhelmed by her inability to stand up to Steven's authority or trust her own parental instincts. The episode Butter's Very Own Episode serves as perhaps the most revealing examination of the Stotch family's fundamental dysfunction, stripping away the comedic surface to expose the psychological devastation that results from parents who prioritize their own emotional needs over their child's safety and well-being. The revelation of Steven's secret life and his desperate attempts to maintain appearances create a family crisis that demonstrates how adult secrets and shame can destroy a child's sense of security and understanding of reality. The attempted murder scene in this episode represents one of the most disturbing moments in South Park's entire run, not because of its graphic content, but because of its psychological realism. Linda's decision to kill Butters, rather than face the social consequences of her husband's behavior, reveals a parent who has become so disconnected from her fundamental responsibilities that she can rationalize child murder as a form of protection. The fact that she frames this attempt as an act of love demonstrates the complete breakdown of normal parental psychology and the terrifying consequences of unchecked mental illness within family systems. Butter's reaction to his near-death experience reveals both his remarkable resilience and the tragic depth of his conditioning to accept parental behavior that should be recognized as abusive. His continued trust in his parents, despite their attempt on his life, demonstrates how thoroughly children can be conditioned to normalize dysfunction when it comes from the people who are supposed to protect them. His inability to understand the true nature of what happened to him reflects both his innocence and the success of his parents' gaslighting, which has taught him to doubt his own perceptions when they conflict with adult authority. The aftermath of the murder attempt, when Butters learns the full scope of his family's secrets and lies, represents a moment of profound psychological trauma that would typically require extensive therapeutic intervention. Instead, the family's response is to attempt to return to normal as quickly as possible, with minimal acknowledgement of the damage that has been done or the changes that need to be made to prevent future harm. This pattern of crisis, followed by denial and attempted normalization, reflects the way that dysfunctional family systems resist change, even when change is clearly necessary for survival. The economic context of the Stotch family provides important insights into the sources of their dysfunction and the pressures that contribute to their problematic parenting patterns. As middle-class suburban parents, Stephen and Linda face the contemporary challenge of maintaining their social status while managing the increasing complexities and costs of modern child rearing. Their anxiety about Butter's behavior often reflects their fear that his perceived failures will reflect poorly on their parenting and damage their standing within their community. The pattern of seeking professional help for Butters whenever his behavior deviates from their narrow definition of normal reveals parents who have externalized their responsibility for understanding their child's emotional needs, rather than developing their own capacity to respond to his psychological development. They consistently turn to outside experts who are supposed to fix whatever they perceive as wrong with him. This approach treats Butters as a problem to be solved rather than a person to be understood and supported through his natural development. The multiple instances of psychiatric evaluation and treatment that Butters endures throughout the series demonstrate his parents' fundamental inability to distinguish between normal childhood behavior and genuine psychological disturbance. Their tendency to pathologize his creativity, imagination, and emotional responses reflects parents who are so anxious about their child's development that they interpret normal variations as evidence of serious problems requiring professional intervention. The grounding episodes that punctuate Butters' storylines throughout the series reveal the arbitrary and often absurd nature of the disciplinary system that governs his daily life. The frequency and duration of these punishments, often imposed for infractions that are either imaginary or beyond his control, create a family environment where punishment becomes a default state rather than a specific response to specific behaviors. This pattern teaches Butters that his parents' approval is unpredictable and often unattainable, regardless of his actual behavior or intentions. The psychological impact of constant grounding extends far beyond simple restriction of activities to encompass a systematic undermining of Butters' sense of agency and self-worth. When punishment becomes divorced from behavior, children learn that their actions have no meaningful relationship to consequences, leading to either learned helplessness or a complete disregard for rules and authority. In Butters' case, the result is a child who desperately seeks approval while remaining perpetually confused about how to earn or maintain it. Stephen's own psychological struggles, particularly his repressed sexuality and fear of social judgment, create additional layers of dysfunction within the family system. His inability to address his own identity issues honestly forces him to project his anxiety and shame onto his son, creating a dynamic where Butters becomes the repository for his father's unresolved conflicts. This emotional burden is far too heavy for any child to carry and contributes to the family's overall instability and dysfunction. The rare moments when Stephen shows genuine affection or pride in Butters highlight the tragedy of their relationship by demonstrating what might be possible if his anxiety and control issues could be addressed. These glimpses of authentic fatherly love make the more typical patterns of criticism and punishment even more painful by showing that Stephen possesses the capacity for healthy parenting but lacks the emotional tools or self-awareness necessary to access that capacity consistently. Linda's attempted suicide following the revelation of Stephen's secret life demonstrates the extent to which the family's dysfunction extends beyond their treatment of Butters to encompass the fundamental instability of the parental relationship itself. Her inability to cope with marital crisis without resorting to extreme measures reveals a woman who lacks the emotional resources necessary to model healthy problem-solving and conflict resolution for her child. The family's response to crisis consistently involves attempts to manage appearances rather than address underlying problems, teaching Butters that image is more important than reality and that family loyalty requires participating in deception and denial. This lesson fundamentally undermines his ability to develop healthy relationships based on honesty and authenticity, as he learns to prioritize others' comfort over his own truth-telling and emotional needs. The economic pressures that influence the Stotch family's decision-making become particularly evident in episodes where Butters' well-being is literally commodified, such as when his parents consider selling him to Paris Hilton for financial gain. These moments reveal parents who have lost sight of their fundamental responsibility to protect their child's interests above all other considerations, including their own financial security and social ambitions. The intergenerational patterns of dysfunction within the extended Stotch family become evident through Butters' relationship with his grandmother, whose bullying and abuse of him reflects the normalization of mistreatment that likely shaped Stephen's own childhood experiences. The failure of Stephen and Linda to protect Butters from his grandmother's abuse demonstrates how unresolved family trauma can perpetuate itself across generations when parents lack the awareness or courage to break destructive patterns. The therapeutic interventions that the Stotch parents seek for Butters consistently focus on changing his behavior rather than examining the family dynamics that might be contributing to his struggles. This approach reflects their unwillingness to consider that their parenting methods might be part of the problem and their preference for solutions that require no change or growth on their part. The social isolation that results from the family's dysfunction affects not only Butters' relationships with peers, but also his parents' connections within the community. Their anxiety about judgment and exposure leads them to withdraw from social supports that might provide perspective and assistance, creating a closed system where dysfunction can intensify without external reality checks or interventions. The contrast between the Stotch family's public presentation and their private reality demonstrates the enormous energy that dysfunctional families must expend to maintain appearances and the psychological cost of this constant performance for all family members. Butters learns early that authentic expression of his experiences and feelings is unwelcome and potentially dangerous, forcing him to develop skills in deception and self-censorship that will affect his ability to form genuine relationships throughout his life. The religious and cultural values that the Stotch family claims to embrace serve more as performance than as genuine guides for behavior, creating additional confusion for Butters about what principles actually govern his family's decisions and priorities. The disconnect between stated values and actual behavior teaches him that moral principles are flexible and that adults cannot be trusted to act according to their stated beliefs. The medical and psychiatric interventions that punctuate Butter's childhood reflect his parents' tendency to seek external solutions for problems that require internal family changes. Their willingness to subject him to potentially harmful treatments rather than examine their own contributions to his struggles demonstrates a fundamental failure of protective instincts and parental responsibility. In the quiet moments between crises, when the Stotch family attempts to function normally, the underlying tensions and unresolved issues continue to shape their interactions in subtle but significant ways. The hypervigilance that characterizes their household creates an atmosphere where normal childhood spontaneity and exploration are viewed as potential threats to family stability rather than healthy expressions of development. The ultimate tragedy of the Stotch family dynamic lies not in its obvious moments of crisis and dysfunction, but in the daily erosion of trust, authenticity, and emotional connection that results from their inability to create a genuinely safe and supportive environment for their child. Despite their stated love for Butters and their genuine desire to be good parents, their unresolved personal issues and dysfunctional relationship patterns create a family system that consistently fails to meet his most basic emotional and psychological needs, leaving him to develop resilience and coping mechanisms that should not be necessary for a child in a healthy family environment. In the cruel mathematics of childhood social dynamics, certain individuals possess qualities that make them uniquely vulnerable to exploitation and abuse, their very virtues transformed into weapons against them by those who recognize and capitalize on their psychological accessibility. Leopold Butters Stotch represents the perfect storm of exploitable characteristics, a combination of trust, eagerness to please, and fundamental decency that creates an irresistible target for predators, both obvious and subtle. His relationship with Eric Cartman, in particular, demonstrates how sophisticated manipulation can operate under the guise of friendship, creating patterns of abuse that are both psychologically devastating and tragically invisible to outside observers. The foundation of Butters' vulnerability lies in his genuine belief in the fundamental goodness of other people, a worldview that makes him incapable of recognizing malicious intent even when it operates openly before him. This philosophical innocence extends beyond simple naivety to encompass a deep-seated psychological need to see the best in others, particularly those who present themselves as his friends. His mind simply cannot process the possibility that someone who claims to care about him might simultaneously be planning his exploitation or harm, creating cognitive blind spots that skilled manipulators can exploit with devastating effectiveness. Eric Cartman's recognition of Butters as the ideal victim represents a masterpiece of predatory psychology, demonstrating how certain individuals possess an almost supernatural ability to identify and exploit human weakness. Cartman recognizes that Butters' desire for acceptance and belonging creates a psychological dependency that can be weaponized through carefully calibrated cycles of inclusion and rejection, approval and disappointment. The genius of Cartman's approach lies not in obvious cruelty, which might provoke resistance or outside intervention, but in the creation of elaborate scenarios where Butters becomes complicit in his own victimization. The Casa Bonita incident serves as perhaps the most comprehensive example of how Cartman transforms Butters' trusting nature into a tool for his own gratification. The scheme begins with the identification of a simple desire, Cartman's wish to attend the restaurant celebration, and evolves into an elaborate psychological campaign that requires Butters to suffer in isolation while believing that his suffering serves a noble purpose. The brilliance of the deception lies in how it reframes victimization as heroism, convincing Butters that his sacrifice is not only necessary but morally praiseworthy. The psychological mechanics of the bomb shelter deception reveal the sophisticated understanding of human psychology that underlies Cartman's most effective manipulations. Rather than simply lying to Butters, Cartman creates an entire alternate reality, complete with supporting evidence, logical explanations, and emotional authenticity that makes the deception virtually undetectable to someone who lacks experience with systematic manipulation. The attention to detail in constructing this false reality demonstrates the enormous effort that predators will invest in maintaining their control over victims who serve their needs. The duration of Butters' isolation in the bomb shelter represents a form of psychological torture that would be recognized as such if perpetrated by adults against other adults, but which operates below the radar of intervention because it occurs within the supposedly innocent context of childhood friendship. The days and nights that Butters spends believing that civilization has ended and that he is alone in a hostile world create trauma that will affect his psychological development for years to come. Yet this suffering is treated as merely an unfortunate consequence of childhood pranks, rather than the serious abuse that it actually represents. The Awesemo deception demonstrates an even more insidious form of psychological manipulation, one that exploits Butters' loneliness and desperate need for companionship by offering him a relationship that appears to meet his emotional needs while actually serving to gather ammunition for future exploitation. The robot persona allows Cartman to present himself as the perfect friend, non-judgmental and unconditionally accepting, while simultaneously remaining completely emotionally unavailable and fundamentally dishonest about his true nature and intentions. The information-gathering aspect of the Awesemo scheme reveals the long-term strategic thinking that characterizes the most damaging forms of psychological abuse. Cartman doesn't simply seek immediate gratification from his deception, but rather uses the false relationship to collect embarrassing secrets and personal vulnerabilities that can be weaponized indefinitely. The trust that Butters places in his robot friend becomes a permanent source of leverage that Cartman can exploit whenever he needs to control or humiliate his victim. The emotional investment that Butters makes in the Awesemo relationship demonstrates how desperate he is for genuine connection and how willing he is to accept even artificial substitutes when authentic friendship seems unavailable. His joy at having found what he believes to be a loyal companion reveals the depth of his loneliness and the extent to which his other relationships have failed to provide the emotional support and understanding that healthy development requires. The revelation of the Awesemo deception creates a form of betrayal trauma that goes far beyond simple disappointment or embarrassment to strike at the very foundation of Butters' ability to trust his own judgment and form meaningful relationships. The discovery that his most trusted confidant was actually his greatest tormentor creates a psychological wound that challenges his basic assumptions about the nature of friendship, loyalty, and human goodness. The liposuction incident represents another dimension of Butters' exploitation, demonstrating how his desire to help his friends can be manipulated into participation in schemes that cause him physical harm while serving others' interests. The boys' willingness to subject him to dangerous medical procedures rather than face the consequences of their own poor planning reveals the extent to which they view him as a disposable resource rather than a person deserving of protection and consideration. The pattern of using Butters as a scapegoat for schemes gone wrong establishes a dynamic where his loyalty and willingness to help become guarantees that he will bear the consequences when others' plans fail. His natural inclination to take responsibility and avoid conflict makes him the perfect fall guy for operations that require someone to absorb blame and punishment while the actual perpetrators escape accountability. The fake death scheme represents perhaps the most callous exploitation of Butter's trust and his parents' love, demonstrating how Cartman's manipulations extend beyond their immediate victim to cause collateral damage throughout his support network. The psychological trauma inflicted on Butter's parents through their belief that their son has died serves Cartman's purposes while creating additional layers of suffering that he views as acceptable costs for achieving his goals. The elaborate nature of the death deception, complete with photographic evidence and detailed staging, reveals the enormous effort that Cartman will invest in maintaining his manipulations when the stakes are high enough. The pig carcass thrown from the building represents not just a prop in an elaborate lie, but a symbol of how completely Cartman has dehumanized his victim, reducing him to mere meat in service of his own desires. The basement imprisonment that follows Butter's resurrection demonstrates how his parents' trauma creates additional opportunities for his exploitation, as their psychological damage makes them unable to provide the protection and support that he needs. The murder of innocent people to feed what they believe is their undead son creates a spiral of violence and horror that stems directly from Cartman's initial deception. The Nintendo Wii freezing scheme reveals another aspect of Butter's exploitation: his willingness to participate in dangerous experiments because he believes he is helping a friend in need. His lack of understanding about the risks involved in cryogenic preservation demonstrates how his trust in Cartman overrides his natural self-preservation instincts, creating situations where his physical safety becomes secondary to his desire to maintain their friendship. The Super Fun Time field trip incident shows how Cartman's selfishness can place Butters in mortal danger without any apparent concern for his well-being or safety. The hand-holding requirement that keeps them connected during a hostage situation reveals how rules and obligations that should protect children can be weaponized by manipulators to create additional vulnerability and risk. The Chinese restaurant hostage situation demonstrates the most extreme consequences of Butter's exploitation, where his participation in Cartman's schemes results in violence and trauma that will affect him for the rest of his life. The gun that he is forced to carry and use represents the ultimate transformation of an innocent child into an unwilling participant in serious crimes that violate his fundamental nature and moral beliefs. The repeated instances of Butters being forced to harm others while believing he is helping or protecting them create a form of moral injury that strikes at the core of his identity as a good person. The psychological damage caused by being made complicit in violence against his will represents one of the most serious forms of abuse that can be inflicted on someone with his temperament and values. The Somalia pirate adventure reveals how Cartman's manipulation can extend beyond individual incidents to encompass extended periods of danger and cultural insensitivity that expose Butters to trauma and exploitation by strangers as well as supposed friends. The journey to a war-torn country in pursuit of criminal activity demonstrates how completely Cartman disregards Butters' safety and well-being when pursuing his own interests. The virtual reality deception that leads to Butters punching his father and subsequently being stabbed shows how manipulation can create cascading consequences that extend far beyond the immediate scheme to affect his relationships with family members and his physical safety. The confusion between virtual and real violence demonstrates how psychological manipulation can distort a victim's perception of reality in ways that have serious real-world consequences. The margarine disguise scheme represents one of the most psychologically complex forms of exploitation, forcing Butters to adopt a false identity and infiltrate a social group under completely dishonest pretenses. The gender deception required for this scheme creates additional layers of confusion and potential identity issues that may affect his psychological development in ways that won't become apparent until years later. The physical transformation required for the Margarine identity demonstrates how far Cartman is willing to go in altering Butter's appearance and social relationships to serve his own purposes. The makeup, clothing, and behavior modification necessary to maintain the deception require Butters to suppress his natural personality and adopt characteristics that may conflict with his authentic self-expression. The social success that Butters experiences as Margarine creates a cruel irony where he finds acceptance and friendship only through complete dishonesty about his identity, suggesting that his authentic self is somehow inadequate for forming meaningful relationships. This message reinforces his insecurities while simultaneously demonstrating that he possesses qualities that others find appealing when not filtered through the lens of his established social position. The aftermath of the Margarine revelation, where Butter's parents believe he has returned from the dead and treat him as a supernatural threat, shows how Cartman's schemes create trauma that extends far beyond their immediate scope to affect every aspect of his victim's life. The chaining in the basement and the feeding of human flesh represent the ultimate consequence of manipulation that has spiraled completely out of control. The pattern of exploitation that characterizes Butter's relationship with Cartman extends beyond individual incidents to encompass a systematic erosion of his autonomy, self-worth, and ability to distinguish between genuine care and manipulative control. Each scheme teaches him lessons about his own powerlessness and the futility of resistance, creating learned helplessness that makes him increasingly vulnerable to future exploitation. The rare occasions when Butters successfully resists or escapes Cartman's manipulation provide glimpses of what he might become if freed from this toxic dynamic, but these moments of empowerment are consistently followed by renewed victimization that reinforces his subordinate position. The cycle of hope and disappointment creates a psychological dependency that keeps him trapped in patterns of abuse, despite his occasional recognition of their harmful nature. The broader implications of Butters' systematic exploitation extend beyond individual harm to encompass questions about community responsibility and the failure of adult supervision to recognize and interrupt patterns of abuse that operate openly within supposedly safe environments like schools and neighborhoods. The adults who witness or learn about Cartman's treatment of Butters consistently fail to intervene effectively, either because they don't recognize the seriousness of the situation or because they lack the tools and authority necessary to address sophisticated psychological manipulation. The long-term psychological consequences of sustained exploitation create developmental delays and distortions that may affect Butters' ability to form healthy relationships and make sound decisions throughout his adult life. The lessons he learns about trust, power, and human nature during these formative experiences become part of his fundamental understanding of how the world operates, creating cognitive and emotional patterns that will influence every future relationship and life choice he makes. In the psychological landscape of childhood development, few phenomena are as fascinating or as tragic as the moment when an individual's capacity for goodness becomes so overwhelmed by accumulated pain that it requires the creation of an entirely separate identity to express forbidden emotions. The birth of Professor Chaos represents one of the most psychologically complex transformations in Leopold Butters Stotch's development, a desperate attempt by a fundamentally gentle soul to access the darker aspects of human experience without compromising the essential innocence that defines his core identity. This emergence of an alter ego reveals the profound psychological pressure that builds when someone with Butters' temperament is subjected to sustained mistreatment while lacking any socially acceptable outlet for the anger, resentment, and desire for revenge that naturally result from such experiences. The catalyst for Professor Chaos's emergence lies in a moment of complete social rejection that strikes at the very heart of Butter's identity and self-worth. The formal dismissal from his friendship with Stan, Kyle, Kenny, and Eric represents more than simple social exclusion. It constitutes a fundamental negation of his value as a person and his right to belong within the social structures that define his world. The clinical nature of this rejection, delivered with the cold efficiency of a corporate termination, transforms what might have been a temporary disappointment into an existential crisis that challenges his basic assumptions about friendship, loyalty, and human decency. The psychological mechanism that creates Professor Chaos operates through what mental health professionals recognize as dissociation, a defense mechanism where the mind creates separate compartments to contain experiences or emotions that are too overwhelming for the integrated personality to process. For Butters, whose entire identity is built around being helpful, kind, and socially acceptable, the emergence of angry, vengeful, or destructive impulses creates an impossible internal conflict that can only be resolved through the creation of an alternate identity capable of expressing these forbidden feelings. The costume and persona of Professor Chaos serve multiple psychological functions simultaneously, providing both protection and permission for Butters to explore aspects of his personality that his normal social conditioning has trained him to suppress. The elaborate outfit, complete with cape and helmet, creates a physical barrier between his everyday identity and these new, dangerous impulses, allowing him to experiment with power and aggression while maintaining psychological distance from actions that conflict with his fundamental self-concept. The name Professor Chaos itself reveals the sophisticated psychological work taking place in the creation of this alternate identity. The title Professor suggests intelligence, authority, and respect, qualities that Butters desperately craves but rarely receives in his normal social interactions. The word chaos represents everything that his orderly, rule-following nature typically opposes, yet also embodies the internal state that his mistreatment has created within his psyche. The combination creates an identity that allows him to be simultaneously intellectual and destructive, authoritative and rebellious. The partnership between Professor Chaos and General Disarray represents one of the few genuinely healthy relationships in Butters' social world, demonstrating his natural capacity for loyalty and collaboration when freed from the exploitative dynamics that characterize most of his friendships. Dougie's willingness to follow his lead and support his schemes provides Butters with the respect and acknowledgement that he has been denied in other relationships, creating a dynamic where his leadership abilities can flourish without being immediately undermined or exploited. The specific schemes that Professor Chaos devises reveal the essential gentleness of Butters' nature, even when he is actively trying to embrace his darker impulses. His inability to conceive of truly harmful or destructive acts, even when operating under the identity of a supervillain, demonstrates how thoroughly his natural compassion has shaped his understanding of what constitutes appropriate behavior toward others. The soup-switching incident at Bennigan's represents the outer limit of his capacity for malicious behavior, revealing someone whose imagination of evil is fundamentally constrained by his inability to genuinely wish harm upon other people. The flooding scheme that involves turning on a garden hose demonstrates both the ambition of Professor Chaos's vision and the innocent naivety that continues to shape his understanding of how the world actually operates. His belief that such a small action could accomplish such a massive result reflects the magical thinking that characterizes much of his worldview. where intention and effort matter more than practical limitations or physical laws. This disconnect between grandiose goals and modest methods creates the tragicomic essence of the Professor Chaos identity. The revelation that his various evil schemes have all been previously executed by the Simpsons creates a moment of profound existential crisis that strikes at the heart of what Professor Chaos represents for Butters' psychological development. The discovery that even his attempts at originality and rebellion are merely repetitions of previous creative works suggests that his quest for individual significance and recognition is ultimately futile, that even his darkest impulses are unoriginal and derivative. The meta-commentary embedded in The Simpsons' revelation demonstrates the sophisticated cultural awareness that shapes Butters' understanding of his place in the world. His recognition that everything has already been done reflects a broader anxiety about originality and significance that extends far beyond individual psychological struggles to encompass contemporary concerns about creativity, authenticity, and cultural exhaustion. The fact that he processes this realization through his supervillain identity rather than his normal persona suggests that Professor Chaos serves as a vehicle for exploring philosophical and existential questions that would be too overwhelming for his everyday consciousness. The psychological resilience that allows Butters to continue developing Professor Chaos schemes despite the Simpsons' revelation demonstrates his fundamental refusal to accept defeat or surrender his agency, even when faced with evidence that his efforts may be meaningless. This persistence reflects both admirable determination and tragic delusion, revealing someone who would rather engage in futile rebellion than accept the powerlessness that his normal social position seems to require. The evolution of Professor Chaos throughout the series shows how this alternate identity adapts and develops in response to changing circumstances and new sources of frustration in Butters' life. The character serves as a psychological pressure valve that allows him to process anger and disappointment without completely abandoning his core identity as a good person. The flexibility of the Professor Chaos persona enables it to encompass different types of rebellion and resistance, as Butters encounters new forms of mistreatment and exploitation. The relationship between Professor Chaos and Butters' other character personas reveals the sophisticated psychological architecture that he has developed to manage the various demands and pressures in his life. Each alternate identity serves specific functions and emerges in response to particular types of stress or social requirements, creating a complex internal system that allows him to navigate situations that would otherwise be psychologically overwhelming. The costume design of Professor Chaos, with its makeshift quality and obvious domestic origins, reflects the resourcefulness and creativity that Butters brings to all of his endeavors, while also revealing the limitations imposed by his circumstances and resources. The homemade nature of the outfit demonstrates his ability to create meaning and identity from available materials, transforming household items into symbols of power and transformation through the force of imagination and will. The cape specifically serves important psychological functions beyond mere costume decoration, providing a sense of dramatic flair and theatrical transformation that helps Butters access emotions and behaviors that would otherwise remain unavailable to him. The flowing fabric creates a sense of movement and dynamism that contrasts sharply with the static powerlessness that characterizes much of his normal social experience. The helmet that conceals his identity serves the crucial psychological function of providing anonymity and protection from the social consequences of his rebellious actions. The physical barrier between his face and the outside world allows him to experiment with power and aggression without risking the social rejection and punishment that would inevitably follow if his normal identity were revealed as the power source of these subversive activities. The laboratory setting that Professor Chaos creates for his scheming represents Butters' attempt to claim physical and psychological space for his alternate identity, creating an environment where his rebellious impulses can be explored and developed without interference from the social forces that normally constrain his behavior. The basement location reflects both the hidden nature of this aspect of his personality and his intuitive understanding that society would not approve of this exploration of darker emotions. The scientific approach that Professor Chaos brings to his evil schemes reflects Butters' natural intelligence and methodical thinking, qualities that are rarely acknowledged or appreciated in his normal social interactions. The careful planning and logical progression of his plots demonstrate intellectual capabilities that are typically overshadowed by his emotional vulnerability and social awkwardness. The recruitment of General Disarray as a loyal sidekick reveals Butters' natural leadership abilities and his capacity to inspire loyalty and dedication in others when given the opportunity to operate from a position of strength rather than weakness. The successful collaboration between the two supervillains creates a model for healthy partnership that contrasts sharply with the exploitative relationships that dominate his normal social experience. The episodic nature of Professor Chaos's appearances throughout the series reflects the psychological function that this identity serves as a temporary escape valve rather than a permanent personality transformation. The fact that Butters can access and abandon this identity as circumstances require demonstrates a psychological flexibility that serves him well in managing the various stresses and challenges of his complex social environment. The humor that emerges from Professor Chaos's schemes stems not from mockery of his limitations, but from appreciation for his creativity and determination in the face of overwhelming circumstances. The gap between his grandiose ambitions and modest capabilities creates comedy that celebrates rather than ridicules his efforts to claim agency and significance in a world that consistently denies him both. The moral complexity of Professor Chaos as a character concept reflects the sophisticated understanding of human psychology that shapes his creation and development. Rather than representing simple rebellion or antisocial behavior, the character embodies the legitimate anger and frustration that result from sustained mistreatment while channeling these emotions into relatively harmless outlets that preserve his essential moral character. The theatrical nature of the Professor Chaos persona reveals Butters' natural understanding of performance and presentation, skills that serve him well in many aspects of his life, but which are rarely recognized or appreciated by those around him. The dramatic flair that he brings to his supervillain role demonstrates an aesthetic sensibility and creative intelligence that enriches his inner life, even when his external circumstances remain challenging. The legacy of Professor Chaos within Butters' psychological development extends far beyond the specific episodes in which the character appears to encompass a fundamental expansion of his understanding of his own capabilities and potential. The creation and maintenance of this alternate identity demonstrates his capacity for psychological complexity and creative problem-solving that will serve him throughout his life, even as the specific circumstances that created the need for Professor Chaos evolve and change. The symbolic significance of Professor Chaos within the broader narrative of South Park reflects the show's sophisticated understanding of how individuals cope with social pressure and personal trauma through creative and imaginative means. The character serves as a reminder that even the most gentle and innocent individuals possess depths of complexity and potential that may never be fully expressed or appreciated within the constraints of their immediate social circumstances. In the quiet moments when Professor Chaos retreats back into the psychological recesses from which he emerged, we glimpse the profound inner life of a child who refuses to be completely defined by his circumstances or limited by others' expectations of who he should be. The existence of this alternate identity ensures that no matter how thoroughly Butters may be dismissed, exploited, or underestimated by those around him, some part of his psyche remains unconquered and unconquerable, ready to emerge whenever circumstances require the assertion of his fundamental dignity and worth as an individual capable of agency, creativity, and transformation. In the delicate architecture of childhood psychology, there exist certain experiences that transcend the boundaries of normal developmental challenges to become defining moments that reshape the fundamental structure of a young person's understanding of safety, trust, and their place in the world. Leopold Butters Stotch has endured a catalogue of such experiences that would challenge the resilience of individuals far older and more emotionally equipped to process trauma. Yet his remarkable capacity to maintain hope and kindness, despite these profound wounds, speaks to both the extraordinary nature of his character and the tragic costs of innocence repeatedly violated by a world that fails to protect its most vulnerable members. The incident involving the adult entertainment tape represents one of the most psychologically complex traumas in Butters' young life, not merely because of the inappropriate content he was exposed to, but because of the complete absence of proper support and guidance in processing an experience that his developing mind was utterly unprepared to handle. The accidental viewing of material designed for mature audiences creates a form of cognitive disruption that goes far beyond simple embarrassment or confusion to encompass a fundamental alteration of his understanding of human relationships, intimacy, and his own developing sexuality. The immediate psychological transformation that follows his exposure to this content demonstrates the profound impact that premature sexualization can have on a child's mental state and behavior patterns. The descent into obsessive, compulsive behaviors and the adoption of characteristics reminiscent of addiction reveal how deeply this experience has penetrated his psychological defenses and disrupted his normal developmental processes. The fact that he begins to exhibit behaviors associated with substance dependency, despite having encountered only visual stimuli, suggests that the neurological and psychological impact of this trauma operates through similar pathways to chemical addiction. The symbolic significance of his transformation into a creature resembling Gollum from the Lord of the Rings trilogy provides insight into how his mind attempts to process and categorize this overwhelming experience. The adoption of characteristics from a fictional character who is defined by obsession and compulsion suggests that his psyche is searching for familiar frameworks through which to understand and express the internal chaos that this exposure has created. The fact that he refers to the tape as his precious reveals how completely the experience has reorganized his priorities and emotional attachments. The physical pursuit that follows, with him chasing after the tape despite obvious danger and social consequences, demonstrates how trauma can override normal self-preservation instincts and social awareness. His willingness to risk injury, embarrassment, and punishment to maintain contact with the source of his trauma reflects the addictive cycle that can develop when inappropriate content becomes associated with powerful, emotional, and physiological responses that a child's developing brain is not equipped to regulate or understand. The tap dancing tragedy represents a different but equally devastating form of trauma, one that transforms Butters' natural talent and source of joy into a source of overwhelming guilt and terror. The accidental death of 8 innocent people during his performance creates what psychologists recognize as survivor guilt, a complex emotional response where individuals who escape harm during tragic events experience profound psychological distress over their survival when others perished. The specific mechanism of the tragedy, with his tap shoe flying off and causing a chain reaction that leads to multiple deaths, creates a particularly cruel form of trauma because it takes an action that was meant to bring joy and artistic expression and transforms it into an instrument of destruction and death. The fact that his genuine talent and enthusiasm directly contributed to the loss of life creates an association between personal excellence and catastrophic consequences that will affect his relationship with success and achievement throughout his life. The recurring nature of the tap dancing trauma, with the same accident happening again just as he begins to overcome his initial psychological wounds, demonstrates how certain individuals seem to be marked by fate for repeated suffering that defies statistical probability and rational explanation. The second occurrence of this highly specific tragedy transforms what might have been processed as a terrible but isolated incident into evidence of some fundamental curse or cosmic injustice that follows him wherever he goes. The years of therapy that follow the tap dancing incidents reveal the inadequacy of traditional therapeutic approaches when dealing with trauma that seems to repeat itself in ways that defy normal psychological healing processes. The fact that professional intervention fails to prevent the recurrence of the same tragic pattern suggests that some forms of trauma operate beyond the reach of conventional treatment methods and create psychological wounds that remain permanently vulnerable to re-injury. The physical assault by Trent Boyett represents trauma of an entirely different nature, one that introduces Butters to the reality of deliberate human cruelty and the ways that past actions can return to cause suffering years after their original occurrence. The childhood incident that led to Trent's imprisonment and subsequent desire for revenge demonstrates how seemingly minor decisions can have profound and lasting consequences that extend far beyond their immediate context. The specific nature of the physical abuse that Butters endures, described in clinical terms that somehow make it both more humorous and more horrifying, reveals the sophisticated understanding of childhood bullying dynamics that shapes this traumatic experience. The variety of torture techniques employed suggests not random violence, but calculated cruelty designed to maximize pain and humiliation, while remaining within bounds that will not trigger serious adult intervention or legal consequences. The psychological impact of this physical trauma extends beyond the immediate pain and embarrassment to encompass a fundamental alteration of Butters' sense of physical safety and personal vulnerability. The knowledge that someone actively wishes him harm and possesses both the ability and willingness to inflict serious physical damage creates a state of hypervigilance and anxiety that will affect his ability to relax and feel secure in his environment. The medical trauma that Butters experiences during his institutionalization represents perhaps the most disturbing category of abuse because it occurs within systems that are ostensibly designed to protect and heal rather than harm. The testing procedures that he endures, conducted by professionals who should be bound by ethical obligations to do no harm, create a form of betrayal trauma that undermines his ability to trust authority figures and medical professionals who should represent safety and healing. The duration of this medical trauma, extending over many hours, transforms what might be processed as a single terrible experience into a sustained period of suffering that creates deeper and more complex psychological wounds. The fact that this abuse occurs with the knowledge and consent of his parents adds layers of betrayal and abandonment that compound the direct trauma and create additional psychological injuries related to his fundamental sense of family, security, and protection. The grandma abuse storyline introduces the concept of intergenerational trauma and the ways that cycles of cruelty can persist within family systems across generations. The physical and emotional abuse that he suffers at the hands of someone who should represent wisdom, comfort, and unconditional love creates a particularly devastating form of betrayal that challenges his basic assumptions about family relationships and the safety that should exist within kinship bonds. The specific tactics that his grandmother employs, including physical violence, emotional manipulation, and deliberate humiliation, demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of psychological warfare that suggests years of experience in breaking down the spirits of vulnerable individuals. The fact that she maintains her own supervillain persona to counter his Professor Chaos identity reveals how completely she has anticipated and planned for his attempts at resistance and self-protection. The isolation that characterizes much of his grandmother's abuse, occurring during visits when his parents are not present to witness or intervene, creates additional psychological damage related to secrecy and the inability to seek help or validation for his experiences. The pattern of abuse followed by normal family interactions teaches him to doubt his own perceptions and creates the kind of cognitive dissonance that can lead to long-term difficulties in trusting his own judgment and emotional responses. The hate comment filtering trauma represents a more modern form of psychological abuse that demonstrates how contemporary technology and social media dynamics can be weaponized to inflict serious emotional damage on vulnerable individuals. The sustained exposure to the worst aspects of human nature and cruelty, concentrated into a continuous stream of hatred and vitriol, creates a form of psychological poisoning that gradually erodes his mental health and emotional stability. The volume and intensity of negative content that he is forced to process daily overwhelms his natural psychological defenses and creates a state of chronic stress and anxiety that manifests in increasingly severe symptoms. The fact that this trauma is imposed upon him as a form of punishment and official responsibility adds elements of powerlessness and institutional betrayal that compound the direct psychological damage from the content itself. The breaking point that leads to his public breakdown demonstrates how even someone with his remarkable resilience and optimism can be pushed beyond the limits of psychological endurance when subjected to sustained exposure to concentrated human malevolence. The naked running and window jumping represent desperate attempts to escape from an internal psychological state that has become unbearable through external means that cannot actually address the source of his distress. The near-death experiences that punctuate Butter's childhood create a recurring theme of mortality and vulnerability that forces him to confront questions about life, death, and meaning that most children his age are protected from considering. The frequency of these life-threatening situations suggests either extraordinary bad luck or the operation of some malevolent force that consistently places him in harm's way despite his innocent nature and good intentions. The stabbing incident that occurs during his confusion between virtual reality and actual experience demonstrates how trauma can create states of dissociation and confusion that make individuals vulnerable to additional harm. The bleeding and hospitalization that result from this misunderstanding create additional layers of medical trauma and physical vulnerability that compound his existing psychological wounds. The psychological impact of witnessing violence and death, whether directly or as a consequence of actions he has been forced to take, creates moral injury that challenges his fundamental sense of right and wrong and his belief in his own goodness. The guilt and confusion that result from being made complicit in harmful actions against his will represent some of the most complex and difficult forms of trauma to process and heal. The pattern of trauma, followed by inadequate support and understanding from the adults in his life, creates additional layers of injury related to abandonment and institutional failure. The consistent inability of parents, teachers, and other authority figures to recognize the severity of his experiences or provide appropriate interventions compounds the direct trauma and creates a sense of existential isolation that may be more damaging than the original traumatic events. The resilience that allows Butters to continue functioning despite this catalogue of traumatic experiences demonstrates remarkable psychological strength, but also raises questions about the long-term costs of such sustained exposure to harm and suffering. The coping mechanisms that he develops to manage these experiences, while allowing him to survive, may also prevent him from fully processing and healing from the psychological wounds that continue to accumulate throughout his young life. The ways that different traumas interact and compound each other within his psychological system create complex patterns of triggers and responses that make his emotional landscape increasingly difficult to navigate safely. The accumulation of multiple forms of trauma creates a psychological environment where new experiences are filtered through previous wounds, potentially transforming even positive events into sources of anxiety and distrust. The rare moments when he receives appropriate support and validation for his traumatic experiences provide glimpses of what healing and recovery might look like if sustained and comprehensive intervention were available. These brief periods of genuine care and understanding demonstrate both his capacity for resilience and growth, and the tragic inadequacy of the support systems that are supposed to protect and nurture children who have experienced significant trauma. The philosophical questions that arise from contemplating the scope and intensity of Butters' traumatic experiences touch on fundamental issues of justice, suffering, and the meaning of innocence in a world that seems systematically designed to destroy the very qualities that make individuals like him valuable and necessary. His continued capacity for hope and kindness despite these experiences represents either remarkable personal strength or tragic delusion, depending on one's philosophical perspective on suffering and resilience. In the gentle quiet of reflection, we recognize that Butters' traumatic experiences serve not merely as plot devices for entertainment, but as explorations of the deepest questions about human nature, institutional responsibility, and the costs of maintaining innocence in a world that consistently fails to protect its most vulnerable members. His story becomes a mirror that reflects our collective failures to create safe spaces for children, while also celebrating the extraordinary resilience of the human spirit when faced with seemingly insurmountable challenges to its essential goodness and hope. In the tender landscape of human emotional development, few experiences carry as much transformative potential as the first encounter with romantic love, that mysterious force that can simultaneously elevate and devastate the human spirit with equal intensity. For Leopold Butters Stotch, whose life has been shaped by patterns of exploitation and disappointment, the realm of romantic feeling represents both his greatest vulnerability and his most profound source of hope, a domain where his capacity for genuine emotion can flourish, even as it exposes him to new forms of heartbreak and confusion that will shape his understanding of intimacy for years to come. The Raisins restaurant incident serves as Butters' introduction to the complex world of romantic attraction and the devastating education that comes with learning to distinguish between genuine affection and performance designed to serve ulterior motives. His encounter with the waitress, who treats him with apparent warmth and attention, provides his first taste of what he believes to be mutual romantic interest, creating a template for love that is built upon fundamental misunderstanding and misinterpretation of social cues that he lacks the experience to decode accurately. The psychology underlying his attraction to the Raisins waitress reveals the deep hunger for positive attention and validation that characterizes so much of his emotional life. Having been starved of genuine affection and appreciation in his family and peer relationships, he finds himself overwhelmed by even the calculated friendliness of someone whose job requires her to be charming and attentive to customers. This professional warmth becomes, in his inexperienced interpretation, evidence of special connection and mutual attraction that exists only in his imagination. The elaborate fantasy relationship that he constructs around these brief interactions demonstrates both his remarkable capacity for hope and his tragic inexperience with the complexities of adult social dynamics. His belief that they are dating, complete with plans for their future together, reveals a mind that is capable of extraordinary emotional investment based on minimal encouragement, creating a psychological setup for devastation when reality inevitably intrudes upon his romantic illusions. The revelation that her friendliness was merely professional performance, rather than genuine personal interest, creates his first encounter with the concept that human warmth can be commodified, and that what feels like authentic connection may actually be calculated behavior designed to serve economic rather than emotional purposes. This lesson strikes at the heart of his fundamental trust in the goodness of other people and introduces him to the painful reality that not all kindness is genuine or disinterested. The heartbreak that follows this revelation provides Butters with his first experience of genuine romantic grief, that unique form of emotional pain that combines loss, rejection, and the death of imagined futures into a psychological experience that can feel physically overwhelming. His response to this pain reveals both his emotional maturity and his philosophical sophistication as he grapples with questions about the nature of love, loss, and the meaning of suffering that many adults never fully explore or understand. The famous Beautiful Sadness speech that emerges from his processing of this heartbreak represents one of the most philosophically sophisticated moments in his character development, demonstrating an understanding of the relationship between joy and sorrow that rivals the insights of professional poets and philosophers. His recognition that the capacity to feel deep pain is inseparable from the capacity to experience profound happiness reveals an emotional wisdom that transcends his chronological age and social inexperience. The concept of beautiful sadness that he articulates speaks to a fundamental truth about human emotional experience that many people spend entire lifetimes trying to understand or accept. His intuitive grasp of this paradox suggests that his traumatic experiences, rather than simply damaging him, have also provided him with insights into the nature of existence that can only come from having genuinely felt the full range of human emotion without the protective cynicism that many people develop to shield themselves from such intensity. His decision to embrace the sadness rather than reject it or seek immediate relief demonstrates a psychological maturity that contrasts sharply with his social naivety in other areas of his life. Rather than allowing the pain to embitter him or create defensive barriers against future emotional investment, he chooses to interpret his suffering as evidence of his capacity for deep feeling and authentic connection, even when that connection proves to be one-sided or illusory. The long-distance relationship with Charlotte from Canada represents a different phase in Butters' romantic development, one where genuine mutual affection exists, but is constrained by external circumstances beyond either participant's control. This relationship provides him with his first experience of authentic romantic connection, where his feelings are reciprocated and valued by someone who appreciates his essential qualities rather than merely tolerating or exploiting them. The challenges of maintaining connection across international borders introduce him to the practical difficulties that can threaten even genuine romantic relationships, teaching him that love alone is not always sufficient to overcome external obstacles and geographical separation. The communication difficulties and cultural differences that characterize their relationship provide valuable lessons about the work required to maintain meaningful connections across distance and difference. The deportation that ends his relationship with Charlotte introduces elements of political and social forces that are completely beyond his control, demonstrating how individual romantic happiness can be sacrificed to larger institutional priorities and immigration policies. This experience teaches him that even genuine love can be destroyed by forces that have nothing to do with the quality of the emotional connection between the people involved. The breakup that follows Charlotte's solidarity with other South Park girls in their collective rejection of the boys represents a particularly painful form of romantic loss because it involves the deliberate choice to end a functioning relationship for political rather than personal reasons. The fact that she chooses group loyalty over individual affection introduces him to the ways that romantic relationships can become casualties of broader social conflicts and ideological commitments. The transformation that this breakup triggers in Butters represents perhaps the darkest period in his romantic development, where his natural optimism and trust become temporarily overwhelmed by anger and resentment that manifest in genuinely troubling ways. His adoption of attitudes and behaviors associated with toxic masculinity and misogynistic thinking demonstrates how romantic disappointment can sometimes catalyze the emergence of harmful ideologies, particularly in individuals who lack adequate support systems and coping mechanisms. The rallying of other boys to his cause during this dark period reveals how personal romantic pain can become politicized and weaponized to serve broader agendas of resentment and social division. His temporary leadership of what amounts to a children's version of men's rights activism demonstrates how individual heartbreak can be exploited by larger cultural movements that seek to channel personal pain into collective anger and social discord. The contrast between his response to the Raisin's heartbreak and his reaction to Charlotte's breakup illustrates the complex factors that influence how individuals process romantic loss and the ways that accumulated disappointment can erode the psychological resources necessary for healthy emotional recovery. The earlier experience, while painful, occurred within a framework of innocence and hope that allowed him to find meaning and beauty in his suffering, while the later breakup occurs after years of additional trauma and exploitation that have depleted his emotional reserves. The Kissing Company venture represents another dimension of his romantic education, introducing him to the concept that physical intimacy can be commodified and that economic transactions can complicate or corrupt emotional connections. His decision to enter into business relationships around romantic activities reveals both his entrepreneurial instincts and his confusion about the appropriate boundaries between emotional intimacy and financial exchange. The evolution of the Kissing Company into what essentially becomes a prostitution ring demonstrates how quickly innocent business ventures can escalate into genuinely harmful activities when participants lack adequate understanding of appropriate boundaries and legal constraints. His gradual adoption of the language and attitudes of exploitation reveals how environmental influences can corrupt even essentially good individuals when they lack proper guidance and oversight. The eventual recognition that his business activities are harmful and exploitative leads to his decision to transfer ownership to the girls involved, demonstrating that his fundamental moral compass remains functional despite his temporary adoption of problematic behaviors and attitudes. This moment of ethical clarity suggests that his essential goodness can reassert itself even when temporarily obscured by external pressures and poor influences. The recurring pattern in his romantic experiences involves the collision between his genuine capacity for deep emotional connection and the various external forces that consistently undermine or exploit this capacity for their own purposes, whether through professional manipulation, political circumstances, or social pressures. His authentic romantic feelings become entangled with dynamics that transform love from a source of joy and connection into a source of pain and confusion. The psychological impact of these repeated romantic disappointments extends beyond simple heartbreak to encompass fundamental questions about his worth as a romantic partner and his ability to inspire genuine affection in others. The pattern of initial connection followed by rejection or exploitation creates self-doubt and insecurity that may affect his approach to future relationships and his confidence in his own lovability. The philosophical insights that emerge from his romantic experiences demonstrate his remarkable ability to extract meaning and wisdom from even painful experiences, suggesting that his emotional intelligence and capacity for growth remain intact despite the various traumas and disappointments he has endured. His reflections on love, loss, and the nature of human connection reveal a depth of understanding that suggests these experiences, however painful, have contributed to his development as a thoughtful and emotionally sophisticated individual. The way his romantic experiences intersect with his other relationships and life circumstances creates complex feedback loops where his romantic disappointments affect his friendships and family relationships, while his broader social struggles influence his romantic confidence and behavior. This interconnectedness suggests that his romantic development cannot be understood in isolation from the broader patterns of exploitation and resilience that characterize his life experience. The moments of genuine romantic connection that he does experience provide crucial evidence that his capacity for healthy relationships remains intact despite the various traumas and disappointments he has endured. These positive experiences serve as psychological anchors that maintain his hope and prevent the complete cynicism that might otherwise result from his pattern of romantic disappointments. The evolution of his understanding of love and relationships over time reveals a learning process that incorporates both positive and negative experiences into an increasingly sophisticated understanding of human emotional dynamics. His ability to maintain hope and continue seeking meaningful connections despite repeated disappointments demonstrates remarkable psychological resilience and suggests that his romantic future need not be limited by his difficult past. The cultural and social contexts that shape his romantic experiences reflect broader patterns of gender relations, economic pressures, and social expectations that affect all young people, navigating the transition from childhood innocence to adult emotional complexity. His struggles with these larger forces illustrate the challenges facing any individual who attempts to maintain authenticity and genuine feeling in a social environment that often rewards manipulation and exploitation. The therapeutic potential of healthy romantic relationships in his future development suggests that positive experiences of mutual respect, genuine affection, and emotional support could play a crucial role in healing the psychological wounds created by his various traumas and disappointments. The capacity for love that he demonstrates, despite all obstacles, remains one of his greatest assets and sources of hope for future happiness and fulfillment. In the gentle twilight of contemplation, we recognize that Butter's romantic journey, with all its pain and beauty, represents the universal human struggle to maintain the capacity for love and connection, despite a world that often seems designed to exploit or corrupt these essential qualities. His continued willingness to risk heartbreak in pursuit of authentic connection demonstrates the fundamental courage required for all meaningful human relationships and serves as a reminder that the ability to love deeply, even at great personal cost, remains one of the most valuable and necessary aspects of human experience. In the intricate psychology of human achievement and recognition, there exists a fascinating paradox whereby individuals who suffer the most consistent victimization and exploitation often possess the very qualities that, under different circumstances, would lead to remarkable success and leadership. Leopold Butters Stotch embodies this contradiction in its most poignant form, demonstrating again and again that his natural talents for organization, motivation, and creative problem-solving remain intact despite the systematic attempts by others to diminish his confidence and exploit his good nature. His various business ventures and entrepreneurial successes reveal a mind capable of sophisticated strategic thinking and an authentic leadership style that inspires genuine loyalty and dedication from those fortunate enough to work with him rather than against him. The foundation of Butters' entrepreneurial success lies in his fundamental understanding of human psychology and his genuine desire to create value for others, rather than simply extract profit for himself. Unlike many business-minded individuals who view customers and employees as resources to be exploited, Butters approaches commercial ventures with the same generous spirit that characterizes his personal relationships, seeking to create genuine benefit and satisfaction for everyone involved in his enterprises. This authentic approach to business creates trust and loyalty that cannot be manufactured through manipulation or strategic positioning alone. His natural leadership abilities emerge most clearly in situations where his authority is recognized and respected rather than undermined by those who seek to exploit his cooperative nature. When given genuine autonomy and the opportunity to make decisions without interference from more aggressive personalities, Butters demonstrates remarkable competence in organizing resources, motivating team members, and developing creative solutions to complex challenges. His success in these leadership roles suggests that his apparent weakness in other contexts stems not from inherent limitation, but from the toxic dynamics of relationships where his good nature is weaponized against him. The Scroty McBoogerball's authorship incident represents perhaps his most dramatic business success, transforming what began as a scheme to avoid responsibility into a genuine literary triumph that showcases his creative abilities and his capacity to capitalize on unexpected opportunities. When the other boys attempt to gaslight him into claiming authorship of their deliberately offensive manuscript, they inadvertently provide him with a platform to demonstrate his actual writing abilities and his sophisticated understanding of literary themes and social commentary. The critical acclaim that greets his assumed authorship of the controversial work reveals both his natural talent for creative expression and his ability to navigate complex social and cultural dynamics with surprising sophistication. Rather than simply accepting credit for work he did not create, he leverages the opportunity to explore his own creative voice and develop his identity as a serious artistic contributor rather than merely a convenient scapegoat for others' schemes. The follow-up book that he writes independently demonstrates his commitment to authentic creative expression and his willingness to take genuine risks with his artistic voice rather than simply coasting on the success of his first accidental literary triumph. The fact that this subsequent work inspires such extreme reactions, including violence against someone he admires, creates a complex moral landscape where his creative success becomes entangled with unintended consequences that challenge his understanding of artistic responsibility. The psychological impact of witnessing violence that stems indirectly from his creative work introduces him to the complex ethical questions that face all artists and content creators who must grapple with the unintended consequences of their expression and the ways that creative works can be interpreted or misinterpreted by audiences in ways that the creator never intended or anticipated. His transformation into Mantequilla during his time in Mexico represents one of his most remarkable leadership successes, demonstrating his ability to inspire and organize communities of people who recognize and appreciate his essential qualities rather than seeking to exploit them. The reverence and loyalty that he inspires among his Mexican followers reveals the natural charisma and motivational ability that remains largely untapped in his normal South Park environment. The specific circumstances that lead to his elevation as a folk hero in Mexico reflect the universal human need for authentic leadership and the way that genuine kindness and competence can inspire extraordinary devotion when encountered in contexts where such qualities are rare and precious. His followers' willingness to risk everything for his cause demonstrates the profound impact that authentic leadership can have on people who have been starved of genuine care and consideration. The challenges of maintaining his leadership position while remaining true to his essential nature create complex moral dilemmas that test his ability to balance his natural compassion with the practical requirements of organizational leadership. His struggles with the responsibilities and expectations of his elevated position reveal both his moral sophistication and his continued commitment to treating others with dignity and respect even when exercising authority over them. The Sarcastable coaching success demonstrates his natural ability to motivate and inspire athletic performance through positive reinforcement and genuine care for his team members' well-being and development. His approach to coaching, emphasizing encouragement and emotional support rather than criticism and intimidation, creates an environment where players can perform at their highest level while developing confidence and mutual respect. The philosophical foundations of Sarcastable as a sport that prioritizes compassion and good sportsmanship over aggressive competition align perfectly with Butter's natural temperament and values, allowing him to excel in a context where his gentleness becomes a strategic advantage rather than an exploitable weakness. His success in this role demonstrates that competitive excellence and emotional kindness are not mutually exclusive, but can actually enhance each other when properly integrated. The team's remarkable performance under his guidance reveals the power of authentic, positive leadership to unlock human potential that might otherwise remain dormant under more traditional authoritarian coaching approaches. His players' obvious affection and respect for him creates a team dynamic that transcends individual performance to encompass genuine collective achievement and mutual support. The ice cream parlor employment represents his most recent and perhaps most significant business success, showcasing his remarkable work ethic, customer service skills, and ability to master complex operational challenges while maintaining the cheerful demeanor and positive attitude that make him such a valuable employee and colleague. His rapid advancement within the organization reflects both his competence and his ability to inspire confidence and trust in supervisors and co-workers. The contrast between his performance as a dedicated employee and Cartman's failure as an exploitative colleague highlights the fundamental differences between authentic value creation and parasitic relationship patterns. While Cartman views the job as an opportunity to extract maximum benefit for minimum effort, Butters approaches his work with genuine commitment to excellence and service that benefits everyone involved in the operation. His eventual takeover of Cartman's restaurant venture demonstrates his ability to transform dysfunctional business operations into successful enterprises through the application of sound management principles and genuine care for both customers and employees. The dramatic improvement in the restaurant's performance under his leadership reveals his natural understanding of operational efficiency and customer satisfaction. The strategic decision to sell the restaurant back to Cartman at precisely the moment when it becomes valuable and desirable represents perhaps his most sophisticated business maneuver, demonstrating that his kindness and generosity should never be mistaken for naivety or lack of strategic thinking. His timing of this transaction reveals a deep understanding of human psychology and the importance of poetic justice in creating meaningful consequences for exploitative behavior. The broader pattern of his business successes reveals consistent themes of authentic value creation, genuine customer care, and positive team dynamics that distinguish his approach to commerce from the more exploitative and manipulative strategies employed by characters like Cartman. His enterprises succeed because they create genuine benefit for all participants rather than simply extracting value from vulnerable individuals or situations. The psychological factors that contribute to his entrepreneurial success include his natural empathy and ability to understand what others truly need and want, his willingness to work hard and take responsibility for outcomes rather than shifting blame to others, and his authentic enthusiasm for activities and projects that align with his values and interests. These qualities, while making him vulnerable to exploitation in personal relationships, become significant competitive advantages in business contexts where trust and reliability are valued. His approach to financial management and resource allocation reflects the same generous spirit that characterizes his personal relationships, with a focus on ensuring that everyone involved in his enterprises receives fair compensation and treatment, rather than maximizing his own profit at others' expense. This ethical approach to business creates long-term sustainability and loyalty that purely profit-driven strategies cannot achieve. The creative problem-solving abilities that he demonstrates across various business ventures reveal a flexible and innovative mind capable of developing original solutions to complex challenges rather than simply following established patterns or conventional wisdom. His willingness to experiment with new approaches and learn from both successes and failures creates a foundation for continuous improvement and growth. The leadership style that he develops through his various business experiences emphasizes collaboration, mutual respect, and shared success rather than hierarchical control and zero-sum competition. His ability to inspire genuine loyalty and dedication from employees and partners creates organizational cultures that outperform more traditional authoritarian structures through superior morale and commitment. The industry knowledge and operational expertise that he develops through hands-on experience in various business sectors demonstrates his capacity for rapid learning and skill development when given appropriate opportunities and support. His mastery of different business models and operational requirements reveals intellectual flexibility and adaptability that serve him well across diverse entrepreneurial challenges. The networking and relationship-building skills that he develops through his business activities create valuable social capital that extends beyond immediate commercial applications to encompass broader community connections and social influence. His reputation for fairness, reliability, and genuine care for others' well-being creates a personal brand that opens doors and creates opportunities that would not be available to less trustworthy individuals. The long-term implications of his business successes extend beyond immediate financial gain to encompass personal development, skill acquisition, and confidence building that will serve him throughout his adult life and career. The experience of succeeding through his own efforts and abilities, rather than simply being a victim of others' schemes, creates psychological resources and self-efficacy that strengthen his resilience and expand his sense of what is possible for his future. The contrast between his business competence and his vulnerability in personal relationships highlights the importance of context and social dynamics in determining whether individual strengths become assets or liabilities. In business environments where performance and results matter more than social manipulation, his authentic approach and genuine competence create clear advantages that cannot be undermined through psychological games or emotional exploitation. The inspiration that his success provides to others who may be struggling with similar patterns of victimization and exploitation demonstrates the broader social value of authentic leadership and the importance of creating opportunities for individuals to demonstrate their capabilities in supportive rather than exploitative contexts. His achievements serve as evidence that apparent weakness can mask genuine strength that emerges when conditions allow for authentic expression. In the gentle recognition of his entrepreneurial achievements, we discover that success and victimization need not be mutually exclusive, that the same qualities that make someone vulnerable to exploitation can also become the foundation for remarkable achievement when channeled into appropriate contexts and supported by relationships based on mutual respect rather than manipulation. His business successes remind us that authentic value creation and genuine care for others remain powerful forces in human commerce, and that the qualities that make someone a good person can also make them an exceptional leader and Bailey Almeida, entrepreneur when given the opportunity to flourish. In the intricate social ecosystem of South Park Elementary, few relationships reveal as much about the complex dynamics of childhood friendship, acceptance, and belonging as those that surround Leopold Butters Stotch. His position within the various social hierarchies and peer networks that define his daily experience demonstrates the profound ways that individual personality traits can either facilitate or complicate the formation of meaningful human connections, creating patterns of interaction that shape not only his immediate social experience, but also his fundamental understanding of what friendship means and how trust operates within human relationships. The relationship between Butters and the core group of Stan, Kyle, Kenny, and Eric represents one of the most psychologically complex friendship dynamics in contemporary media, encompassing elements of genuine affection, systematic exploitation, protective instincts, and casual cruelty that reflect the broader contradictions and moral ambiguities that characterize many real-world social relationships. His persistent desire to be accepted by this group, despite their repeated mistreatment of him, reveals the powerful human need for belonging that can override rational self-interest and basic self-protection when social isolation feels like the only alternative to problematic relationships. Stan Marsh's relationship with Butters operates on multiple levels simultaneously, combining moments of genuine protective concern with episodes of thoughtless exploitation that reflect the complex moral development of a child who is still learning to navigate the competing demands of peer pressure, personal conscience, and social convenience. Stan's occasional recognition of Butters' mistreatment and his sporadic attempts to defend him suggest an underlying moral awareness that conflicts with his desire to maintain his position within the group dynamic and avoid the social costs of challenging more aggressive personalities. The psychology underlying Stan's ambivalent treatment of Butters reveals the common childhood struggle between doing what feels morally right and maintaining social relationships that provide security and status within peer networks. His moments of clarity about the unfairness of Butters' treatment are consistently overwhelmed by his unwillingness to risk his own social standing or face potential retaliation from characters like Cartman, who view any challenge to their exploitation as a personal attack, requiring immediate and disproportionate response. Kyle Broflovsky's interactions with Butters demonstrate a different form of moral complexity, where his strong ethical convictions create internal conflict about the treatment that Butters receives from the group, while his practical awareness of social dynamics prevents him from taking the kind of consistent stand that might actually improve Butters' situation. Kyle's occasional expressions of sympathy or concern for Butters' well-being reveal his recognition that their treatment of him crosses moral boundaries. Yet his failure to translate this recognition into sustained protective action reflects the limitations of even well-intentioned moral awareness when not backed by practical commitment to change. The specific incidents where Kyle shows genuine concern for Butters' safety and well-being, such as during episodes where Butters faces serious physical or psychological danger, demonstrate his capacity for authentic friendship and protective instincts that extend beyond the superficial social dynamics that normally govern their interactions. These moments reveal that underneath the complicated group dynamics lies a foundation of genuine human caring that could potentially develop into healthier relationship patterns if the social context were modified to reward rather than punish such expressions of concern. Kenny McCormick's relationship with Butters operates within the unique constraints of Kenny's own social position. As someone who occupies a liminal space within the group hierarchy, possessing insider knowledge and acceptance, while simultaneously remaining vulnerable to exclusion and mistreatment based on his economic status and family circumstances. This shared vulnerability creates potential common ground between Kenny and Butters. Though Kenny's survival strategy of maintaining low profile and avoiding attention often prevents him from offering the kind of support and advocacy that might benefit them both, the rare occasions when Kenny demonstrates protective instincts toward Butters or expresses concern about his treatment reveal an underlying empathy and moral awareness that suggests he recognizes their similar positions within the social hierarchy and understands the psychological costs of systematic marginalization and exploitation. However, his own precarious social position and family obligations limit his ability to take risks on behalf of others, creating a tragic dynamic where those who might most benefit from mutual support are prevented from providing it by their own vulnerability. The friendship between Butters and Dougie represents one of the few genuinely healthy and reciprocal relationships in his social world, demonstrating his capacity for authentic connection and mutual support when freed from the exploitative dynamics that characterize most of his peer interactions. Their partnership as Professor Chaos and General Disarray provides both characters with opportunities to express aspects of their personalities that are suppressed or ridiculed in their normal social contexts, creating a safe space for exploration and creative expression. The loyalty and mutual respect that characterize the Butters-Dougie friendship stands in stark contrast to the conditional and manipulative nature of his relationships with more prominent characters, revealing that his social difficulties stem not from inherent limitations in his capacity for friendship, but from the toxic dynamics of relationships where his good nature is viewed as a resource to be exploited rather than a quality to be valued and reciprocated. The evolution of their friendship over time, through various shared adventures and challenges, demonstrates Butters' natural capacity for inspiring loyalty and dedication when his relationships are based on genuine mutual interest and respect, rather than one-sided exploitation. Dougie's consistent willingness to support Butters' schemes and share in both their successes and failures creates a model of friendship that highlights what is missing from his other social relationships. Butters' interactions with female classmates reveal another dimension of his social development, one where his natural kindness and respect for others create opportunities for more balanced and healthier relationship dynamics than typically emerge in his friendships with male peers. His respectful treatment of girls and his ability to form genuine connections across gender lines suggest that his social difficulties may be partially related to the specific cultural dynamics of masculine peer groups that reward aggression and exploitation while punishing sensitivity and cooperation. The episodes where he successfully infiltrates female social groups, whether through deception or genuine acceptance, reveal his natural ability to understand and respond to social dynamics based on mutual support and emotional authenticity rather than competition and dominance. His comfort within these alternative social structures suggests that his apparent social awkwardness may be context-dependent, rather than reflecting fundamental limitations in his social capabilities. His relationships with adult authority figures outside his family demonstrate another aspect of his social competence, revealing his ability to interact appropriately and effectively with individuals who recognize and appreciate his positive qualities, rather than seeking to exploit them. Teachers, employers, and other adults who encounter him in contexts where his helpful nature and genuine enthusiasm are valued tend to respond to him with warmth and respect that contrasts sharply with his treatment by peers. The way that different adults respond to Butters reveals the extent to which his social difficulties stem from the specific dynamics of his peer relationships, rather than any inherent deficiency in his social skills or likability. Adults who are not influenced by the social hierarchies and competitive dynamics that govern childhood peer relationships consistently recognize his positive qualities and treat him with the respect and consideration that should be the foundation of all healthy social interactions. The psychological impact of his complex social relationships extends beyond immediate social satisfaction to encompass his developing understanding of trust, loyalty, friendship, and human nature more broadly. The mixed messages he receives from relationships that combine genuine moments of connection with systematic exploitation create confusion about what he should expect from others and what kinds of treatment he should accept or resist. The coping mechanisms that he develops to manage the stress and disappointment of his complicated social relationships reveal both his resilience and the psychological costs of maintaining hope and optimism in the face of repeated betrayal and exploitation. His ability to continue seeking genuine friendship despite patterns of disappointment demonstrates remarkable emotional strength, but may also reflect a lack of healthy boundaries that leaves him vulnerable to future exploitation. The rare moments when he successfully asserts himself within group dynamics or refuses to accept mistreatment demonstrate that he possesses the capacity for self-advocacy and boundary setting when circumstances align to support Suchtbehavior. These episodes suggest that his typical passivity stems more from learned helplessness and social conditioning than from inherent weakness or inability to recognize inappropriate treatment. The way his social relationships intersect with his family dynamics creates complex feedback loops where problems in one area of his life exacerbate difficulties in others, while successes and positive experiences can create momentum for improvement across multiple relationship domains. His parents' response to his social difficulties often compounds rather than addresses the underlying issues, creating additional barriers to healthy social development. The community context within which his social relationships develop reflects broader cultural patterns around childhood social hierarchies, bullying, adult supervision, and intervention in peer conflicts that shape the environment within which all children must navigate their social development. The failure of adult authority figures to recognize and address the systematic mistreatment that occurs within peer relationships creates conditions where exploitation can flourish unchecked The long-term implications of his childhood social experiences for his adult relationship patterns and social skills remain complex and multifaceted, with both positive and negative elements that will likely influence his future friendships, romantic relationships, and professional interactions. The resilience and empathy that he has developed through managing difficult social situations may serve him well in adult contexts, while the confusion and boundary issues created by exploitative relationships may require ongoing attention and healing. The philosophical questions raised by examining his social relationships touch on fundamental issues about the nature of friendship, the responsibilities that individuals bear toward vulnerable community members, and the social conditions that either promote or undermine healthy relationship development. His experiences serve as a lens through which to examine broader questions about kindness, exploitation, community responsibility, and the protection of vulnerable individuals within social systems. The moments of genuine connection and mutual respect that do occur within his social relationships provide evidence that healthy friendship remains possible, even within challenging social environments, suggesting that individual choices and small acts of kindness can create meaningful positive change even when larger systemic issues remain unaddressed. These positive experiences serve as crucial counterbalances to the more problematic dynamics and provide hope for future relationship development. In the quiet reflection on the complex web of relationships that surrounds Butters, we recognize that his social world serves as a microcosm of larger human community dynamics, revealing both the potential for genuine care and connection that exists within all social groups and the persistent challenges of creating environments where such positive potential can flourish while protecting vulnerable individuals from exploitation and harm. His continued faith in the possibility of authentic friendship, despite repeated disappointments, represents a form of social courage that enriches not only his own life, but the lives of those fortunate enough to experience his genuine care and loyalty. In the profound depths of childhood consciousness, where questions about existence, meaning, and morality first take root and begin to shape the fundamental architecture of human understanding, few characters demonstrate as sophisticated a philosophical framework as Leopold Butters Stotch. His approach to the great questions that have puzzled humanity throughout history reveals a mind that operates with remarkable clarity and wisdom, processing complex theological, ethical, and existential concepts through the lens of lived experience rather than abstract theoretical knowledge. His journey through faith, identity, and moral development provides a unique window into how genuine philosophical inquiry can emerge naturally from the intersection of innocence and suffering, creating insights that often surpass the understanding of those with far more formal education and worldly experience. The foundation of Butters' relationship with religious faith demonstrates his natural inclination toward transcendent meaning and his intuitive understanding that human existence involves dimensions beyond the immediately visible and tangible. His engagement with Christianity and religious concepts reveals not the rote acceptance of doctrine that characterizes many childhood religious experiences, but rather a genuine wrestling with questions of divine purpose, moral responsibility, and the meaning of suffering that reflects the mind of a natural theologian grappling with ultimate questions through direct personal experience. His participation in the Christian rock band Faith Plus One provides insight into his sophisticated understanding of the relationship between authentic spiritual feeling and its cultural expression, revealing his ability to distinguish between genuine religious sentiment and the performative aspects of religious community life. His discomfort with the deceptive elements of their musical career demonstrates his instinctive recognition that spiritual authenticity cannot be manufactured or manipulated for external purposes without corrupting the essential truth that gives religious experience its transformative power. The moral complexity that emerges from his involvement in religious performance reveals his growing awareness that even activities undertaken with good intentions can become entangled with motives and consequences that compromise their spiritual integrity. His struggle with the ethical implications of using religious language and imagery to serve secular purposes reflects a theological sophistication that many adult believers never develop, suggesting that his moral intuition operates at levels that transcend his chronological age and formal religious education. The philosophical framework that underlies his famous Beautiful Sadness speech reveals profound insights into the nature of human experience and the relationship between joy and sorrow that align with some of the deepest wisdom traditions in human culture. His recognition that the capacity for deep emotional pain is inseparable from the capacity for profound happiness demonstrates an understanding of existential paradox that rivals the insights of professional philosophers and contemplative practitioners who have devoted lifetimes to exploring these questions. The concept of beautiful sadness that he articulates speaks to fundamental truths about the human condition that most people spend years or decades learning to accept and integrate into their understanding of what it means to live a meaningful life. His ability to embrace suffering as evidence of his capacity for authentic feeling, rather than as proof of cosmic injustice or personal failure, reveals a spiritual maturity that suggests natural wisdom rather than learned response to philosophical teaching. His approach to questions of death and mortality, shaped by his numerous near-death experiences and exposure to violence and loss, demonstrates remarkable psychological resilience combined with genuine philosophical curiosity about the ultimate questions of existence. Rather than becoming traumatized or cynical about the fragility of life, he maintains an attitude of wonder and inquiry that allows him to continue growing and learning from each encounter with mortality and meaning. The way he processes complex adult themes and social issues through his child's perspective reveals his ability to cut through cultural conditioning and social convention to identify core moral and ethical principles that transcend specific cultural contexts. His responses to political events, social conflicts, and cultural controversies consistently demonstrate his commitment to basic human decency and fairness, rather than ideological positioning or tribal loyalty. His understanding of justice and moral responsibility reflects a natural ethical framework that prioritizes compassion and understanding over punishment and retribution, suggesting an intuitive grasp of restorative rather than retributive approaches to conflict resolution. His consistent willingness to forgive those who harm him while maintaining appropriate boundaries and expectations for better treatment demonstrates a sophisticated balance between mercy and self-respect that many adults struggle to achieve. The role of imagination and creativity in his worldview reveals his recognition that human consciousness possesses capacities that transcend literal, material reality, and that meaning-making often requires the kind of symbolic and metaphorical thinking that allows individuals to connect their immediate experience with larger patterns of significance. His comfort with fantasy, role-playing, and creative expression suggests his intuitive understanding that imagination serves crucial psychological and spiritual functions in human development. His perspective on social issues and political events demonstrates his ability to maintain moral clarity while avoiding the kind of partisan thinking that corrupts ethical reasoning and reduces complex human situations to simplistic, ideological categories. His responses to community conflicts and social tensions consistently reflect his commitment to treating all individuals with dignity and respect, regardless of their group affiliations or cultural identities. The balance he maintains between innocence and wisdom reveals his remarkable ability to preserve the openness and wonder of childhood, while integrating the hard-won insights that come from experiencing suffering and disappointment. This integration of apparently contradictory qualities suggests a psychological maturity that allows him to learn from difficult experiences without becoming hardened or cynical about human nature and the possibilities for positive change. His approach to moral education and character development reflects his understanding that ethical behavior emerges from internal conviction rather than external compulsion, and that genuine goodness cannot be forced or manufactured through manipulation or coercion. His resistance to various attempts to modify his behavior through psychiatric intervention or behavioral conditioning demonstrates his intuitive recognition that authentic moral development must come from within rather than being imposed from without. The way he navigates questions of personal identity and social belonging reveals his sophisticated understanding of the difference between conformity and genuine community, between acceptance that requires the suppression of authentic self-expression and belonging that celebrates individual uniqueness while maintaining group cohesion. His ability to maintain his essential nature while adapting to different social contexts suggests remarkable psychological flexibility combined with core stability. His responses to philosophical and existential challenges demonstrate his natural capacity for the kind of contemplative inquiry that forms the foundation of genuine wisdom traditions, revealing a mind that can hold complexity and paradox without rushing to premature closure or simplistic resolution. His comfort with uncertainty and mystery suggests a spiritual maturity that recognizes the limitations of human understanding while maintaining confidence in the possibility of meaningful engagement with ultimate questions. The integration of his various traumatic experiences into a coherent worldview that maintains hope and compassion demonstrates his remarkable capacity for meaning-making and psychological resilience. Rather than allowing suffering to embitter him or create cynical detachment from life, he consistently transforms pain into wisdom and uses his difficult experiences as sources of empathy and understanding for others who face similar challenges. His understanding of love and relationships reflects a philosophical sophistication that recognizes the difference between authentic connection based on mutual respect and appreciation, and relationships based on manipulation, exploitation, or codependency. His continued commitment to seeking genuine friendship and romantic connection despite repeated disappointments demonstrates his faith in the possibility of authentic human communion. The way he processes questions of personal responsibility and moral agency reveals his recognition that individuals possess both the freedom to make ethical choices and the responsibility to consider the consequences of their actions for others. His consistent willingness to take responsibility for his own mistakes while refusing to accept blame for circumstances beyond his control demonstrates a balanced understanding of personal accountability. His approach to cultural and religious diversity reflects his natural inclination toward tolerance and understanding rather than judgment and exclusion, suggesting his intuitive recognition that different traditions and perspectives may offer valuable insights into the human condition, while none possesses complete or final truth about ultimate reality. The philosophical insights that emerge from his various adventures and misadventures reveal his ability to extract meaning and wisdom from even the most absurd or challenging circumstances, demonstrating the kind of reflective capacity that transforms experience into understanding and allows individual growth to continue, even in the face of repeated setbacks and disappointments. His understanding of the relationship between individual fulfillment and community responsibility reflects his recognition that genuine happiness cannot be achieved at the expense of others' well-being. and that authentic self-realization requires attention to the broader social and moral context within which individual life unfolds. The way he navigates questions of authority and tradition demonstrates his ability to respect legitimate sources of wisdom and guidance while maintaining his critical faculties and refusing to surrender his moral autonomy to external authorities who may not have his best interests at heart. His balance between humility and independence suggests a mature understanding of how to learn from others while maintaining personal integrity. His approach to forgiveness and reconciliation reveals his understanding that healing and growth require the ability to release resentment and anger while maintaining appropriate boundaries and expectations for future behavior. His consistent willingness to give others second chances, combined with his growing ability to protect himself from repeated exploitation, demonstrates emotional wisdom that many adults never develop. In the quiet contemplation of Butter's philosophical journey, we recognize that his insights emerge not from abstract theoretical study, but from the authentic engagement with life's fundamental challenges that characterizes all genuine wisdom traditions. His continued commitment to growth, learning, and service, despite the various obstacles and disappointments he has encountered, represents a form of spiritual courage that illuminates not only his own path, but also offers guidance and inspiration for others who struggle with similar questions about meaning, purpose, and the possibilities for authentic human flourishing in a complex and often difficult world. In the fascinating realm of speculative psychology, where fictional characters serve as mirrors for exploring human potential and the complex interplay between circumstance and character development, few narratives offer as rich an examination of divergent life paths as the contrasting futures presented for Leopold Butterstotch in the post-COVID specials. These alternate timelines provide profound insights into the delicate balance of factors that shape individual destiny, revealing how the same foundational personality can evolve in radically different directions depending on the social, economic, and psychological environments that either nurture or corrupt its essential qualities over time. The dystopian future that transforms Butters into Victor Chaos represents one of the most psychologically complex character transformations in contemporary media, demonstrating how sustained isolation, technological manipulation, and the absence of meaningful human connection can corrupt even the most fundamentally good-natured individual into something approaching genuine evil. This dark evolution serves not merely as entertainment, but as a cautionary tale about the psychological prerequisites for maintaining mental health and moral integrity in an increasingly connected yet emotionally isolated world. The specific circumstances that create Victor Chaos reveal the sophisticated understanding of psychological development that underlies this transformation, beginning with the seemingly mundane incident of being locked in his room while his parents attend a movie. This moment of parental neglect, which might seem minor in isolation, becomes the catalyst for a cascade of psychological changes that ultimately reshape his entire identity and relationship with the world around him. The extended duration of his isolation, spanning 16 years of crucial developmental time, represents a form of psychological torture that would challenge the resilience of even the most emotionally robust individual. During these formative years, when he should have been developing adult social skills, romantic relationships, career aspirations, and independent identity, he instead remained trapped in a state of suspended adolescence, where his emotional and social growth became stunted and distorted by the artificial constraints of his confinement. The role of technology in his transformation reveals the dark potential of digital connectivity to serve as both lifeline and poison, providing him with access to the wider world while simultaneously enabling the kind of antisocial behavior that his isolation makes psychologically necessary for survival. The iPad that sustains him during his imprisonment becomes both his window to human connection and the instrument of his moral corruption, demonstrating how technology can amplify rather than resolve underlying psychological damage. The development of his expertise in online manipulation and cryptocurrency schemes reflects the way that his natural intelligence and understanding of human psychology, qualities that might have been channeled into positive leadership and community building under different circumstances, become twisted into tools for exploitation and financial predation when shaped by isolation and resentment rather than love and social connection. The specific focus on NFT promotion as his method of choice for exploiting others reveals a sophisticated understanding of how contemporary economic trends and technological innovations create new opportunities for sophisticated financial manipulation that can operate at scales previously impossible for individual predators. His ability to convince people to invest their life savings in essentially worthless digital assets demonstrates both his manipulative genius and the tragic waste of abilities that could have served beneficial purposes. The trail of financial destruction and suicide that follows in his wake represents the ultimate consequence of his transformation from someone who naturally sought to help and please others into someone who views human vulnerability as an ATM, opportunity for exploitation. The fact that his victims choose to end their lives rather than continue existing after losing everything to his schemes reveals the profound psychological damage that financial predation can inflict on individuals and families. The asylum containment that society eventually imposes upon Victor Chaos reflects both the recognition of his danger and the complete failure of social systems to address the root causes of his transformation or provide any meaningful possibility for rehabilitation or healing. His classification as too dangerous for release suggests that his psychological damage has progressed beyond the point where conventional therapeutic intervention might restore his capacity for healthy human connection. The contrast between Victor Chaos and the alternative future where Butters works as a manager at the Applebee's Denny's Max restaurant provides crucial insight into the environmental and social factors that distinguish between positive and negative character development trajectories. This healthier timeline demonstrates that his essential qualities of leadership, service orientation, and genuine care for others remain intact when circumstances allow them to flourish, rather than be corrupted by isolation and exploitation. The restaurant management position represents the perfect integration of his natural talents with meaningful work that provides both personal satisfaction and genuine service to his community. His obvious contentment with his role demonstrates that happiness and fulfillment do not require extraordinary achievement or recognition, but rather the opportunity to exercise one's natural abilities in service of purposes that align with one's values and provide genuine benefit to others. The specific choice of restaurant work as his successful career path reflects deep understanding of his character and the way that his natural hospitality, attention to detail, and genuine care for others' well-being translate perfectly into the service industry, where these qualities become valuable professional assets rather than exploitable weaknesses. His advancement to management demonstrates that these same qualities also provide the foundation for effective leadership when supported by appropriate training and organizational structures. The psychological factors that distinguish between these two futures reveal the crucial importance of early intervention, social support, and meaningful community connection in preventing the kind of isolation and resentment that can transform even fundamentally good individuals into threats to themselves and others. The timeline where his parents return from their movie represents not just a different sequence of events, but an entirely different approach to family responsibility and child welfare. The role of community institutions and social safety nets in shaping these alternative outcomes suggests that individual character development cannot be understood in isolation from broader social and economic systems that either support or undermine human flourishing. The dystopian timeline reflects not just personal failure, but systemic failure to create environments where vulnerable individuals receive appropriate care and support during crucial developmental periods. The economic dimensions of both futures reveal how financial systems and opportunities can either channel individual talents toward constructive or destructive ends, with legitimate employment and fair compensation, providing pathways toward positive contribution, while predatory economic schemes offer tempting alternatives for those who feel excluded from conventional success pathways. The psychological realism of both transformations reflects sophisticated understanding of how individual personality traits interact with environmental pressures over time to create complex developmental trajectories that may not become apparent until years or decades after the crucial formative experiences have occurred. Neither future represents sudden character change, but rather the logical extension of existing personality traits shaped by radically different circumstances and opportunities. The therapeutic implications of these alternative futures suggest that even severely damaged individuals might retain capacity for positive change if appropriate interventions and support systems could be provided, while also acknowledging that some forms of psychological damage may progress beyond the point where conventional rehabilitation approaches remain viable. The social responsibility themes that emerge from examining these contrasting destinies raise important questions about collective obligations to protect vulnerable community members and create social conditions that support rather than undermine healthy character development. The Victor Chaos timeline serves as an indictment not just of parental neglect, but of broader social failures to recognize and address emerging psychological problems before they become dangerous. The philosophical questions raised by these alternative futures touch on fundamental issues of determinism versus free will, individual responsibility versus social causation, and the possibility of redemption versus the permanence of psychological damage. The fact that both futures emerge from the same character suggests that human potential remains fundamentally malleable throughout crucial developmental periods. The symbolic significance of these contrasting destinies extends beyond individual character development to encompass broader cultural anxieties about technology, isolation, economic inequality, and the erosion of traditional social support systems that once provided frameworks for healthy community integration and individual development. The hope embedded in the positive timeline demonstrates that even individuals who have experienced significant trauma and disadvantage retain capacity for meaningful contribution and personal satisfaction when provided with appropriate opportunities and support systems that recognize and value their essential qualities rather than exploiting their vulnerabilities. The warning contained in the negative timeline serves as a reminder that neglect, isolation, and the absence of meaningful human connection can corrupt even the most fundamentally good-natured individuals, creating dangers that extend far beyond the immediate victims to encompass entire communities and social systems. In the gentle contemplation of these possible futures, we recognize that character development represents an ongoing process throughout human life, shaped by countless interactions between individual traits and environmental influences that either support or undermine our highest potentials. Butter's alternative destinies remind us that the future remains unwritten and that small acts of care, attention, and social responsibility can make profound differences in individual lives, while their absence can create consequences that extend far beyond what we might imagine possible, from seemingly minor instances of neglect or indifference. As our journey through Butter's world draws to a peaceful close, we find ourselves enriched by the gentle wisdom of South Park's most resilient soul. Leopold Stotch teaches us that kindness need not be weakness, that innocence can coexist with understanding, and that hope persists even in the face of repeated disappointment. His story reminds us that the capacity for joy and wonder exists within us all, waiting to be nurtured rather than exploited. In a world that often rewards cynicism and cruelty, Butters stands as a beacon of what we might become if we choose compassion over convenience, trust over suspicion, and love over fear. His famous words about beautiful sadness ring true not just for heartbreak, but for the entire human experience. That our capacity to feel pain is inseparable from our ability to feel joy. Rest now in the knowledge that somewhere in the snowy streets of South Park, a boy still believes in the goodness of others, still finds wonder in simple pleasures, and still carries the light that makes our world a little brighter. Sleep peacefully, knowing that such sweetness exists in the world,